The warning signs. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Thexis of the Vorlon Collective raised all four of her crystalline appendages. Around the circular hall, representatives from 47 species watched the holographic display flicker to life above the council floor. What they saw made even the most seasoned diplomats shift uncomfortably in their seats. 3 more worlds, Thexis said, her voice resonating through the translation fields. In the past standard month alone, the Terran Empire has established what they call humanitarian outposts on 3 more independent worlds. Chancellor Mravok, a towering Klendari whose scales shimmered with anxiety patterns, leaned forward. Humanitarian? Is that not their word for aid and assistance? It was, replied Thexis grimly. 20 cycles ago when humanity first joined our assembly, that word meant something pure. They brought medicine, technology, education. They asked for nothing in return. She paused, letting the hologram shift to show sprawling complexes on distant planets. Now look at what their outposts have become. The images revealed massive installations, defense grids, manufacturing centers, spaceports capable of handling warships. And everywhere, the new flag of the Terran Empire, a clenched fist holding a torch against a field of stars. Counselor Zephyra, whose people had been humanity's first alien contact, spoke softly from her floating platform. This is not the humanity we welcomed. Not the species that wept when they first learned they were not alone in the universe. No, agreed Thexis. The Terran Republic died 15 years ago. What emerged from its ashes is something we should have stopped before it grew strong. The hologram changed again, showing graphs and statistics. Military production, fleet expansions, territorial annexations disguised as protection agreements. The numbers climbed steadily year after year, an unbroken curve of growth that made every pattern recognition instinct scream danger. The question before this council, Thexis continued, is no longer whether the Terran Empire has changed. The question is what we do about it before we can no longer do anything at all. Ambassador Reichel of the Drachner Sovereignty, a species that prided itself on military tradition, spoke up. His battle-scarred face showed concern rather than his usual confidence. My analysts have reviewed their recent war games. The scenarios they run, the tactics they practice, these are not defensive preparations. The Terran Empire is training to fight enemies with superior technology and numbers. Enemies like us, someone muttered from the back chambers. The comment hung in the air like a curse. Thexis pulled up another display. 2 months ago, the Terran Empire completed construction of the Vanguard, their new flagship. Our intelligence suggests it is the first of a class of at least 50 such vessels. Each one is larger than anything we have ever built. The weapon systems alone dwarf our most advanced cruisers. They claim it is for exploration, Mravok said weakly. The Vanguard mounted weapons capable of cracking planetary shields, Thexis replied flatly. What exactly do they plan to explore? A younger representative, Kessa of the Lumini Unity, rose with her bioluminescent patterns flashing rapid concern. Perhaps we judge too harshly. Humanity has been a productive member of our coalition. They have shared technology, open trade, established cultural exchanges. Their entertainment alone has enriched dozens of worlds. Entertainment that spreads their values, Reichel countered. Their stories of manifest destiny, of humanity spreading across the stars, of humans as the heroes who solve every crisis. I have watched their youth consume these narratives. They believe they are destined to lead the galaxy. Thexis nodded slowly. And that is precisely what frightens me. It is not their weapons, though those are formidable. It is not their industrial capacity, though it exceeds our projections. What terrifies me is their absolute certainty that they are right. That their way is the only way forward. She gestured to the displays. Every species here has at some point been tempted by empire. We have all felt the pull of expansion, the desire to reshape the galaxy in our image. But we learned restraint. We built this council to check those impulses. Her voice dropped. Humanity never learned that lesson. They went from planetary civilization to interstellar empire in barely 2 centuries. They never experienced the humility of discovering they were small and insignificant. Because when they discovered us, Zephyra added quietly, they saw not teachers or equals but opportunities. The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Some defended humanity's contributions. Others cited grievances and broken agreements. A few advocated for immediate action, though none could agree on what that action should be. Thexis waited for the noise to subside. We have a choice to make. We can pretend that the Terran Republic still exists, that the Empire is just a phase, that the humans we befriended 40 years ago still guide their civilization. She let that sink in. Or we can acknowledge what the evidence makes clear. The Terran Empire is no longer a member of our coalition. It is a rival power that grows stronger every day we hesitate. Chancellor Mrvok's scales had shifted to a deep purple of distress. You speak of containment. Perhaps even conflict. I speak of survival, Thexis replied. Because I have studied Earth's history. I have read their ancient texts, watched their archived wars, analyzed their cultural evolution. And I have found one consistent pattern across every continent, every era, every iteration of human civilization. She paused. When humanity believes it has a divine right to rule, when it convinces itself that might makes right, when it decides that others are obstacles rather than equals, history shows us exactly what happens next. The hologram changed one final time, showing a simple star map. Blue icons marked the Galactic Council's sphere of influence. Red icons showed the Terran Empire's claimed territory. The red had nearly encircled the blue. They are not expanding outward into empty space, Thexis said softly. They are expanding around us. In 10 years, perhaps 15, they will have us surrounded. And then they will not ask to join our council. They will demand we join their empire. Kessa's lights dimmed to a sickly yellow. Surely not. Humanity values freedom and self-determination. It is core to their identity. Their freedom, Reichel said grimly. Their self-determination. I have spoken with their diplomats, the new generation trained under the empire. They smile when they talk about liberation. They speak of bringing enlightenment to backward species. They truly believe they are saving us from ourselves. Thexis looked around the chamber at the assembled species, each one ancient and proud, each one convinced of their own importance. We thought we were mentoring humanity. We thought we were guiding them toward wisdom. We were wrong. We gave them our technology without understanding their hunger. We opened our borders without measuring their ambition. We welcomed them as children. She closed all four of her eyes briefly before continuing. They have become something we cannot control. Something we may not be able to stop. And the worst part, the truly terrifying part, is that they do not see themselves as conquerors. They see themselves as heroes. Every world they subsume, every species they bring under their protection, every ancient culture they remake in their image, they do it believing they are helping. Believing they are chosen for this purpose. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally Mrvok spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What do you propose? Thexis straightened, her crystalline form catching the chamber's light. We propose Project Threshold. A coordinated effort to establish clear boundaries that the Terran Empire cannot cross. We freeze their expansion. We limit their military growth. We remind them that they are one species among many, not the inheritors of the galaxy. And if they refuse? Asked another counselor. Then we will know for certain what they have become, Thexis replied. And we will respond accordingly. The vote was called. Around the chamber, representatives signaled their choices. The tally appeared in holographic script above the floor. The measure passed with a 2/3 majority. Somewhere deep in Thexis's core, where her species stored their emotional memories, she felt a profound sadness. She had genuinely loved the humans she had met decades ago. Their passion, their curiosity, their reckless bravery in the face of an infinite universe. She had believed they would elevate the galaxy. Instead, she feared they would burn it down. As the session adjourned and representatives filed out, Zephyra floated beside Thexis. Do you think we have waited too long? Thexis watched the hologram fade, the red icons disappearing last. I think we should have acted 20 years ago when they reorganized their government. When they stopped calling themselves a republic and embraced the title of empire. She turned to her old friend. But we told ourselves it was just terminology. Just a cultural quirk. We did not want to believe that our friends had changed. And now we must hope that some part of the old humanity remains. Some memory of who they were before ambition consumed them. Thexis moved toward the exit, her appendages moving in the rhythm of deep worry. Because if we are wrong, if they have fully committed to this path, then what we fear they have become may be far worse than any of us dare imagine. Behind them, the chamber lights dimmed, leaving only the eternal flame that symbolized the Council's commitment to peace. Outside, among the stars, the Terran Empire continued its inexorable expansion. And aboard the Vanguard, Admiral Kane Vorstern looked at a similar star map and smiled. The Admiral's conviction. The observation deck of the Vanguard stretched the length of 3 commercial shuttles, its transparent hull offering an unobstructed view of the cosmos. Admiral Kane Vorstern stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the construction drones weave between the skeletal frames of 3 more dreadnoughts. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said without turning. Behind him, Commander Lissa Tarrant checked her datapad before responding. "The Aegis-class vessels are ahead of schedule, sir. They will be operational within 8 months instead of the projected 12. "I wasn't talking about the schedule, Commander." Kane turned, his weathered face creasing into something between a smile and a grimace. "I meant the site itself. Humanity building monuments to our future among the stars. When I was a boy, we still debated whether we were alone in the universe. Now look at us." Lissa had served under Kane for 7 years. She knew when he was in a philosophical mood, which usually meant something significant was about to happen. "The Council has summoned Ambassador Heron, sir. They are calling it a mandatory consultation." "Of course they are." Kane walked to the tactical display embedded in the deck's center platform. With a gesture he activated it, and a 3-dimensional map of local space materialized. "Show me the threshold initiative." The map changed, highlighting a boundary that surrounded human space like a noose. Beyond the line, marked in Council blue, were 70 systems that humanity had earmarked for development. Within the line, colored in Empire red, were their current holdings. "They want us to stay inside this box," Kane said quietly. "No expansion beyond these coordinates. No additional military construction. All new outposts subject to Council inspection." He looked up at Lissa. "They want us contained." "Sir, some of our own diplomats believe it is a reasonable compromise. The Council is not demanding we surrender existing territory. They simply want assurance we will not threaten their interests." "Their interests?" Kane deactivated the map and walked to the viewport again. "Commander, how many species in the Galactic Council are currently at war with each other?" Lissa consulted her pad. "Active conflicts. 14. Border disputes number 43. Resource conflicts another 29. "And how many of those conflicts has the Council successfully resolved in the past decade?" 3, sir." 3. Kane let the word hang. "They maintain a fleet 3 times the size of ours, collectively. They control resources we can only dream of. They have technologies we are still trying to understand. And yet, they cannot manage peace among themselves." He turned back to face her. "But they fear us. Why?" Lissa knew this was not really a question for her but let it stand anyway. Kane continued. "They fear us because we do what they cannot. We unite. When the Vorlon Collective discovered 12 colony worlds dying from a quantum plague, which species mobilized relief ships within 48 hours? We did, sir. When the Drachner sovereignty faced a rebellion in the Outer Arm, which species offered neutral mediation that actually worked? We did, sir. When the Lumini Unity star began destabilizing and they needed to evacuate 20 billion citizens, who provided transport and resettlement? We did, sir." Lissa's voice was softer now. Kane walked back to the tactical display and brought up a different image. It showed the Terran Empire's organizational structure, a clean hierarchy where decisions flowed efficiently from civilian government through military channels to implementation. "The Council fears our effectiveness. They fear that we represent everything they failed to become." He pulled up another image, this one showing the Council's labyrinthine bureaucracy, where any decision required approval from 17 subcommittees before reaching a vote of the full assembly. They are paralyzed by their own complexity. They cannot act decisively because every action threatens to upset the delicate balance between member species. So they talk. They debate. They form committees to study the committees that study the problems. His voice hardened. And while they talk, people die. Colonies fail. Opportunities vanish. Lissa shifted her weight slightly. "Sir, with respect, some might say we act too decisively. The Korvax incident, for example." "Ah yes, the Korvax." Kane brought up footage of a desert world, where human engineers had built atmospheric processors to make the planet habitable. The Korvax remnant asked for our help terraforming their dying homeworld. We agreed, asking only for resource rights to 3 uninhabited asteroids. We spent 8 years and considerable treasure making that world livable again. The image shifted to show protests, Korvax natives carrying signs written in their angular script. Then their politicians decided we had too much influence. They claimed we were cultural colonizers because our engineers taught their students our languages and methods. They demanded we leave immediately without compensation. We left, Lissa noted. We left, Kane agreed. After removing every piece of technology we had installed. Every atmospheric processor, every water reclamation plant, every power generator. If they wanted to be free of human influence, we gave them exactly that. He closed the image. The council called it vindictive. I call it instructive. Actions have consequences. The Korvax homeworld is dying again, Lissa said quietly. Yes. And they have petitioned the council for aid 17 times in the past year. The council forms committees. Kane's expression was unreadable. If they had honored their agreement with us, 20 million Korvax would not be refugees right now. But we were the villains in that story because we insisted on mutual respect. He opened a secure channel on the display. Show me the classified assessment. A document appeared, marked with the highest security clearances. Lissa had seen it before, but reading it again still sent a chill through her. Intelligence suggests that 12 species in the council are actively preparing for conflict with us, Kane read aloud. Not immediate conflict, but within 10 to 15 years, they expect war to be inevitable. He looked up. This is what they really think of us, Commander? Behind all the diplomatic language about cooperation and mutual respect, they are preparing to destroy us. Or preparing to defend themselves, Lissa suggested carefully. From what? Kane's voice rose slightly. Name one species we have attacked without provocation. One world we have conquered against its will. One treaty we have broken. Lissa remained silent because the answer was clear. There were none. Our crime, Kane said, his voice returning to its usual measured tone, is that we are too successful. We build faster, organize better, solve problems more efficiently. And instead of learning from us, instead of adapting their own systems, they choose fear. They choose containment. They choose to preserve their failing status quo rather than embrace necessary change. He pulled up one more image. This one showed a young human girl holding hands with a Lumini child, both laughing at some shared joke. The photo had been taken on New Harmony, one of the few worlds where multiple species lived in genuine integration. This is what we can offer the galaxy, Kane said softly. Not domination. Not conquest. But actual unity. Real cooperation between species. Not this pretense the council maintains where everyone smiles during conferences and then returns to their ethnic enclaves, nursing ancient grudges. Sir, Lissa ventured, do you believe war is inevitable? Kane was quiet for a long moment. I believe the council will force us to make a choice. Accept containment and slow decline, watching them tear themselves apart while we remain imprisoned in our designated space. Or break free, expand as we must, and face their combined opposition. That is not really a choice. No, Commander. It is not. Kane turned off the displays, leaving only the stars cape beyond the viewport. Which is why I have requested permission from Earth Central to implement Operation Manifest. Lissa felt her blood go cold. Sir, that plan is classified at the executive level. Even discussing it without authorization could what? Get me relieved of command? Kane smiled without humor. Commander, I have served the Terran Empire for 38 years. I was part of the Republic before that. I have watched our species go from hesitant explorers to confident builders of civilizations. And I will not stand by while aliens who cannot even govern themselves dictate our future. Operation Manifest calls for preemptive expansion into all contested zones simultaneously, Lissa said, her voice barely above a whisper. It is effectively a declaration that we will not accept the Threshold Initiative. Correct. The Council will see it as an act of war. The Council, Kane replied, will see it as a statement of fact. We are not their subordinates. We are not children to be disciplined. We are humanity and we bow to no one. Lissa looked at the Admiral, this man she had served under and respected, and wondered when exactly he had stopped seeing other species as partners and started seeing them as obstacles. Or perhaps he had always seen them this way, and she had just been too naive to notice. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. Are we the heroes in this story, or have we become the villains? Kane considered the question seriously. History is written by those who survived to write it, Commander. The Council fears what we have become because we have become what they could not. We have transcended our base nature, our tribal conflicts, our petty divisions. We are unified in purpose and vision. That terrifies them because it exposes their own failures. He placed a hand on her shoulder. When this is over, when the Terran Empire spans the galaxy as it was meant to, we will be remembered as the species that brought true unity to the stars. Not the false unity of the Council, where species maintain separate governments and compete for scraps. But real unity, where the best system prevails and all benefit from its implementation. And if other species do not want our system? Then we will teach them to want it, Kane said simply. Through example, through incentives, through whatever means necessary. Because Commander, the alternative is chaos. The alternative is watching the galaxy burn while we stand aside, capable of helping but forbidden by alien powers that are too short-sighted to see what we see. Lissa thought about the girl in the photograph, laughing with her alien friend. She wondered if they were still friends, or if the growing tensions had driven them apart. When does Operation Manifest begin? She asked. The moment Ambassador Heron tells the Council that humanity will not accept their terms, Kane replied. 3 days from now we will show them what the Terran Empire truly is. Not through words or diplomacy but through action. He gazed out at the construction yards where more ships were taking shape, each one a promise and a threat. They fear what we have become, Kane said quietly. And they should. Because we have become everything they are not, decisive, united, and absolutely certain of our destiny among the stars. Lissa excused herself shortly after, citing duties that needed attention. As she walked through the Vanguard's corridors, she passed crew members who worked with pride and purpose. They believed in the Empire. They believed in the mission. And part of her believed too. But another part, a small voice she tried to ignore, wondered if Admiral Kane was leading them toward salvation or damnation. Outside, among the stars, the galaxy held its breath. In 3 days it would have its answer. The Ambassador's Dilemma. Ambassador Marcus Heron had not slept in 36 hours. He sat in his private quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Concordia, staring at the official response he was supposed to deliver to the Galactic Council in less than 48 hours. The message from Earth Central was clear and unambiguous. It was also insane. "Computer, play message 7 again," he said wearily. The holographic display activated, showing the stern face of Chancellor Victoria Reigns, the civilian head of the Terran Empire's government. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes held no warmth. "Ambassador Heron, the Empire's position is non-negotiable. We will not accept the Threshold Initiative as proposed. We will not limit our expansion into unclaimed space. We will not submit to Council inspections of our sovereign territory. You will deliver this message to the Council clearly and without equivocation. We are not asking for permission to exist as a free people. We are informing them that we will exist as a free people, regardless of their objections." The message continued, outlining exactly what Heron was to say, and how he was to say it, but his attention had drifted. He had heard it enough times to recite it from memory. Computer off. The hologram vanished, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Marcus Heron had been present at first contact 42 years ago. He had been a junior xenolinguist then, part of the team that decoded the Lumines greeting transmission. He remembered the joy, the wonder, the overwhelming emotion of realizing that humanity was not alone. He remembered crying. Grown men and women, scientists and soldiers, all of them crying with pure joy. The Lumini had welcomed them with open appendages. The Vorlon Collective had shared technology freely. The Drachner sovereignty had offered military protection while humanity learned to navigate the dangerous realities of interstellar politics. For 20 years it had been glorious. Then the Mars incident happened. Marcus closed his eyes, not wanting to remember but unable to forget. A trade dispute between human colonists and Vorlon merchants had escalated. Threats had been made. Boundaries had been crossed. And then, in a moment of pride and anger, the Martian defense fleet had fired on a Vorlon vessel. 300 Vorlon souls had died. The Council had demanded the responsible officers be turned over for trial. Earth's Republic government, weak and divided, had agreed. The officers were sentenced to life imprisonment on a Vorlon penal colony. The public outcry had been immediate and overwhelming. How dare aliens judge human soldiers? How dare the government surrender its own people? Within a year the Republic had fallen. The Empire had risen from its ashes, built on a promise that never again would humanity bow to alien authority. Marcus had supported the change. At the time it had seemed reasonable. Humanity needed to be strong to stand proud among the stars. But somewhere along the way strength had become dominance. Pride had become arrogance. Self-determination had become manifest destiny. A chime announced a visitor. Marcus straightened, trying to look more composed than he felt. "Enter." The door slid open, revealing Thexis of the Vorlon Collective. Her crystalline form caught the light, creating small rainbows across the walls. "Ambassador Thexis," Marcus said, standing. "This is unexpected." "I am here unofficially," she replied, her translated voice carrying notes of weariness that matched his own. "May I speak with you, not as council representative to Imperial Ambassador, but as two old friends?" Marcus gestured to a seat, though Thexis did not truly sit so much as configure her form to rest. We are still friends? I would like to believe so. Thexus's multiple eyes focused on him. Marcus, I watched the translation of your prepared statement. I know what you have been ordered to say tomorrow. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. That is classified information. We have infiltrated each other's intelligence services for years. Let us not pretend otherwise. Thexus leaned forward slightly. I am not here to argue policy. I am here to ask you personally, if you believe the path your empire is walking leads anywhere but war. Marcus was silent for a long moment. I believe we have a right to exist as a free and independent species. No one disputes that right. The Threshold Initiative disputes it, Marcus countered. You would place limits on where we can settle, what ships we can build, how we can govern ourselves. That is not freedom, Thexus. That is a cage with prettier bars. It is not a cage. Thexus's form shifted, colors rippling across her surface in patterns Marcus had learned to read as frustration. It is a boundary. All civilized species accept boundaries. You do not build a house without walls. You do not organize a society without laws. The Council is simply asking humanity to acknowledge that you are not alone in the galaxy. We know we are not alone, Marcus said. We also know that the Council's idea of cooperation means humanity subordinating our interests to species that have proven incapable of managing their own affairs. Is that what you truly believe? That we are incapable? Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Council station that orbited the neutral world of Sanctuary. I believe that in the 42 years since first contact, I have watched the Council fail to resolve countless crises. I have seen species within your coalition go to war with each other while the Council debated proper procedure. I have seen worlds die while committees argued over jurisdiction. He turned back to face her. And I have watched humanity accomplish in decades what takes your species centuries. We built new harmony in 8 years, Thexus. 8 years, and we created a world where 5 different species live in genuine integration. How many such worlds has the Council created in its 1,000-year history? 1, Thexus admitted quietly. Sanctuary itself, and even here we live in separate districts. Exactly. Marcus sat down again. So when you ask if I believe the Empire's path leads to war, I turn the question back to you. Does the Council's path lead anywhere but stagnation? Are you really asking us to slow down and join you, or are you asking us to slow down so you do not have to confront your own failures? Thexus was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice carried a sadness that transcended translation. I understand your frustration. I even sympathize with it. But Marcus, my old friend, you must understand what you look like from our perspective. She gestured, and a small hologram appeared between them, showing Earth. When we first met your species, you were fragmented. Hundreds of governments, thousands of cultures, all competing and conflicting. We thought it would take you centuries to achieve even basic unity. The image shifted, showing humanity's rapid expansion. Instead, in barely 2 generations, you unified under a single government. You eliminated internal dissent. You streamlined decision-making. You became efficient. The hologram now showed the current Terran Empire, its red borders expanding steadily outward. Too efficient. So efficient that it frightens us. Why should efficiency frighten you? Marcus asked. Because, Thexus replied, history shows that when a species becomes too efficient at expansion, too unified in purpose, too certain of its righteousness, the result is always the same. The hologram shifted again, now showing ancient images from multiple worlds. Empires rising and falling. Conquests and collapses. The result is empire in the truest sense. Not a government, but a force that cannot stop growing until it either consumes everything or destroys itself. Marcus looked at the images. He recognized some of them from Earth's own history. Rome, Mongolia, Britain, America. All of them empires that had believed in their own exceptionalism. All of them convinced they were bringing civilization to the barbarous. We are not like those, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. No. Thexus dismissed the hologram. Tell me, Marcus, what do you call what happened to the Korvax remnant? They violated a treaty. We withdrew our support. You punished an entire species for political decisions made by a new government that did not agree to the original terms. 20 million refugees, Marcus. That is not withdrawal. That is collective punishment. They made a choice. We simply respected that choice and its consequences. And the Talvrix Confederation? When they refused to allow the Empire to build military installations on their borders. Marcus's jaw tightened. The Talvrix were given a fair offer. They chose to reject it. We moved forward with alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements that involved funding opposition groups until their government collapsed, Thexis said flatly. The new government, coincidentally, approved your installations within a month of taking power. We did not start the Talvrik civil conflict. Their own internal corruption did that. But you profited from it. You weaponized it. You turned their dysfunction into your opportunity. Thexis's colors had shifted to deep blue, a color Marcus had learned meant disappointment. This is what we see, Marcus. Not the humanity that wept at first contact, but an empire that uses any means necessary to expand its influence, that views other species as obstacles or resources, that speaks of liberation while demanding compliance. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. And what would you have us do? Stay quiet? Stay small? Watch as species like the Drachner sovereignty maintain standing armies 3 times our size while telling us we are too militaristic? Watch as the Vorlon collective controls trade routes through their monopolies while lecturing us about economic fairness. We would have you be patient, Thexis said. We would have you understand that the galaxy is ancient and complex. That rushing forward without consideration has consequences. We have been patient for 40 years, Marcus replied. We have attended your councils. We have followed your procedures. We have tried to work within your system. And what has it gotten us? Suspicious glances. Restrictive policies. And now, open containment. He stood again, his frustration no longer containable. The Threshold Initiative is not about protecting the Council's interests. It is about protecting the Council's power. You see us rising, and it terrifies you not because we are violent but because we are competent. We shame you by doing better than you ever did. Perhaps, Thexis said softly, perhaps we do fear your competence. Perhaps we do see our own failings reflected in your success. She rose, her form expanding slightly. But Marcus, fear is not always irrational. Sometimes fear is wisdom. Sometimes the thing we fear is genuinely dangerous. So we are dangerous now? You are becoming dangerous, Thexis corrected. There is a difference. The humanity I met 40 years ago was curious and humble. They knew they were young and inexperienced. They listened more than they spoke. They asked before they acted. Her eyes fixed on him. That humanity would never have given Admiral Kane Vorstern command of your largest fleet. That humanity would be horrified by some of the things your empire does in their name. Marcus wanted to argue but found he could not. Because Thexis was right. The Old Republic would never have approved half of the Empire's current policies. They would have seen them as steps toward authoritarianism. Toward imperialism, in fact, not just name. Times change, he said weakly. We had to adapt. Or you had to abandon your principles, Thexis replied. Marcus, I am going to tell you something that is also unofficial. Something my own government would not appreciate me sharing. She moved closer. There are factions within the Council that want open war with your empire. Right now. Before you grow any stronger. They believe that in 10 years you will be unstoppable. They want to act while they still can. Marcus felt cold. Are you threatening us? I am warning you, Thexis said. Because despite everything, I still remember my friend Marcus who cried when we first made contact. Who told me that meeting us was the greatest moment of his life. Who believed that humanity and the Council could build something beautiful together. She turned toward the door, then paused. The statement you will give tomorrow, the one your Chancellor prepared, it will be the final provocation. The Council will see it as proof that the Empire cannot be reasoned with. They will vote for containment, and when you inevitably reject that containment, they will vote for enforcement. Then they will vote for war, Marcus said quietly. Yes, Thexis agreed. And in that war, countless billions will die. Worlds will burn. Civilizations will fall. All because humanity could not accept that being part of the galactic community means accepting limits. Or because the Council could not accept that humanity will not be caged. Thexis's colors shifted to something Marcus did not recognize. Then I suppose we are at an impasse. She moved toward the door. For what it is worth, Marcus, I am sorry. I'm sorry we could not find a better way. I am sorry that first contact, which should have been the beginning of something wonderful, may instead be remembered as the beginning of the end. The door opened and she left without another word. Marcus stood alone in his quarters, holding the statement he was supposed to deliver. The words seemed heavier now, each one a potential death sentence for billions. He thought about changing the message, softening it, finding compromise language that might give both sides room to step back from the brink. But he knew Earth Central would never accept modifications. Chancellor Rains had made that clear. The Empire's position was non-negotiable. Marcus sat down at his desk and began composing a personal message. Not to Earth Central. Not to the Council. But to his daughter, who was studying xenobiology on New Harmony, living proof that different species could coexist. He wanted to tell her he was sorry. Sorry that his generation had failed. Sorry that they had let pride and fear turn first contact into first conflict. The breaking point. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council was designed to inspire awe. Its dome stretched 300 meters high, constructed from transparent crystalline alloys that turned the structure into a lens focusing starlight from above. When the full council convened, representatives from 47 species gathered in concentric rings, each ring representing a tier of membership and influence. Today every seat was filled. Ambassador Marcus Heron stood at the central podium, a single human figure surrounded by hundreds of alien observers. The weight of their collective attention pressed down on him like a physical force. Chancellor Murvok's voice resonated through the chamber. Ambassador Heron of the Terran Empire, you have requested this assembly to respond to the Threshold Initiative. The Council recognizes you. Please proceed. Marcus activated his neural link, and the prepared statement materialized in his visual cortex. Chancellor Raines's words, carefully crafted to project strength without quite declaring war. Diplomatic language wrapped around an iron core of refusal. He opened his mouth to begin. And stopped. The silence stretched. Hundreds of eyes, in dozens of configurations, watched him. Waiting. Marcus thought about Thexus's warning. About his daughter on New Harmony. About the young man he had been 42 years ago, weeping with joy at first contact. Members of the Council, he began, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. I stand before you today representing the Terran Empire, but I also stand before you as someone who has witnessed every moment of humanity's journey among the stars. From first contact to this moment, I have been there. This was not the prepared statement. In his mind's eye, he could see Chancellor Raines's face contorting with fury. But Marcus continued. The Threshold Initiative asks my people to accept limits on our expansion, our military capacity, and our sovereign decision-making. My government views these requests as unacceptable restrictions on our fundamental rights as a free species. He paused, looking around the chamber. But I would be dishonest if I did not acknowledge that I understand why you fear us. A murmur rippled through the assembly. This was definitely not the prepared statement. Humanity has changed since we first joined this council, Marcus continued. We have grown strong. Perhaps too strong too quickly. We have become efficient at things that previously took generations. And in that efficiency, we have sometimes forgotten the humility that once defined us. In the Vorlon section, he saw Thexus's crystalline form shimmer with surprise. However, Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly, I must also speak truth about the council itself. In 40 years of membership, I have watched this body struggle to resolve conflicts between its own members. I have seen paralysis masquerading as deliberation. I have watched worlds suffer while committees debated proper procedure. Chancellor Murvok's scales shifted to warning colors. Ambassador, please confine your remarks to the matter at hand. I am speaking to the matter at hand, Marcus replied. Because the Threshold Initiative is not really about containing humanity's expansion. It is about containing humanity's example. You fear not what we might do but what we represent. The possibility that your system is not the only way. That efficiency and unity might actually work better than bureaucracy and endless debate. Now the murmurs turned angry. Representatives from multiple species began calling for order. Marcus raised his voice. But I also acknowledge that our empire has made mistakes. We have been aggressive where we should have been patient. We have viewed other species as obstacles when we should have seen them as partners. We have let our strength make us arrogant. He took a breath. This next part would end his career, but it needed to be said. So I will not deliver the statement my government prepared. I will not tell you that the Terran Empire rejects the Threshold Initiative completely. Instead, I will tell you something more dangerous. The truth. The chamber erupted. Some species demanded he be silenced. Others called for him to continue. Chancellor Murvok was pounding his gavel, trying to restore order. Marcus waited for the noise to subside. When it did, he spoke quietly, forcing the chamber to strain to hear him. The truth is that we are at a crossroads. Humanity and the Council both face a choice. We can continue down this path of mutual suspicion and fear, which leads inevitably to conflict. Or we can find a different way. Not the Council's way. Not the Empire's way. But a new way that neither of us has been brave enough to imagine. He looked directly at Thexus. You said that the humanity you first met was curious and humble. You're right. We were. But we were also naive. We thought that good intentions and cultural exchange would be enough. We learned that the galaxy is more complicated than we imagined. More dangerous. More political. Then he looked at Ambassador Reichel of the Drachner sovereignty. And you, who pride yourselves on military tradition, have watched us build fleets that rival your own. You see it as a threat. But from our perspective, we are simply ensuring that we will never again be at the mercy of species who might not have our best interests at heart. Marcus deactivated the neural link completely, speaking now from his heart rather than any script. Here's what I propose. Not on behalf of my government, but as someone who has dedicated his life to the dream of genuine cooperation between species. Give us a test case. One world, one project where the Council and the Empire work together as genuine equals. Not with the Council setting terms and humanity following them. Not with humanity taking charge and the Council observing. But true partnership. Ridiculous, someone shouted from the upper tiers. The Empire cannot be trusted. Can we not? Marcus challenged. Or have you simply never tried trusting us? Have you ever offered us genuine partnership instead of junior membership in your club? But as he wrote, he found himself defending the Empire's position. Explaining why boundaries were unacceptable. Why humanity had to stand firm. He deleted the message without sending it. Tomorrow he would deliver his statement. Tomorrow the Council would respond. And tomorrow, the galaxy would learn whether the Terran Empire's rise would be remembered as humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest tragedy. Marcus looked out at the stars and wondered if Thexus was right. If somewhere along the way, in their rush to prove themselves worthy, humanity had lost the very qualities that made them worth knowing. He had no answer. And in 24 hours it would no longer matter. Chancellor Mervok finally managed to restore order. His voice was cold. Ambassador Heron, you were sent here to deliver your government's official position. Not to engage in freelance diplomacy. My government's official position, Marcus said quietly, will lead to war. I am trying to find an alternative. An alternative that requires us to trust an empire that has consistently expanded its power at every opportunity? This came from a Lumini representative, her biological lights flashing angry crimson. An empire that overthrew its own democratic government? That replaced representative democracy with centralized authority? That speaks of unity while eliminating dissent. Marcus felt the accusation like a physical blow because it was true. The empire had done all those things. In the name of efficiency, of strength, of never again being vulnerable, they had sacrificed freedoms that had once been sacred. You are correct, he admitted. And I cannot defend all of my government's choices. But I can ask you this. When has punishing an entire species for the actions of its government ever led to peace? When has containment ever resulted in anything but eventual conflict? He gestured around the chamber. Half of you are preparing for war with us. The other half are preparing for war with each other. This council was founded to prevent conflict, but it has become a forum where conflicts are managed, not resolved. Where species maintain armies and territories and ancient grudges while pretending to cooperate. And your empire is better? Reichel demanded. Your humans speak of manifest destiny. Of humanity's right to spread across the galaxy. You have simply traded the chaos of multiple governments for the tyranny of one. Perhaps, Marcus acknowledged. Or perhaps we have traded inefficiency for effectiveness. Paralysis for decisiveness. The question is whether effectiveness is inherently evil, or whether it depends on how it is used. Thexus rose from her position. Marcus, you speak eloquently of finding a new way. But you avoid the central question. Is the Terran Empire willing to accept that other species have the right to develop at their own pace? To maintain their own systems even if those systems are less efficient than yours? To exist without being pressured to adopt your model? Marcus met her eyes. I believe so. But I also believe the Council must answer the same question in reverse. Are you willing to accept that humanity's system, however alien to your values, is valid for us? That we have the right to organize ourselves as we choose without being contained for choosing differently? Even if your system inevitably leads to expansion that threatens us? Ravak asked. Expansion into unclaimed space, Marcus corrected. We have never taken territory from Council species by force. No, just by economic pressure, political manipulation, and overwhelming presence, another voice called out. The debate continued for hours. Species that had remained silent for decades spoke up, airing grievances both ancient and new. The humans were too aggressive. The Council was too restrictive. Trust had been broken. Opportunities had been wasted. Fear had replaced hope. Through it all, Marcus stood at the podium answering questions, accepting criticism, and pushing back when accusations went too far. He knew his career was over. Chancellor Rains would never forgive this deviation from orders. But for the first time in years he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Finally, as the primary star outside the dome began to set, Chancellor Mrvak called for a recess. This assembly will reconvene in 8 standard hours. At that time, Ambassador Heron will provide his government's official position. Until then we are adjourned. As representatives filed out, discussing the extraordinary session, Thexus approached the podium. That was either the bravest thing I have ever witnessed or the most foolish. Probably both, Marcus admitted. He felt exhausted, emotionally and physically drained. You realize you have accomplished nothing except delaying the inevitable? Thexus said, though her tone was gentler than her words. Maybe. Or maybe I bought time for people to actually think instead of just reacting. Marcus gathered his materials. Thexus, I meant what I said. About finding a new way. About genuine partnership. I know you did. She moved closer. But Marcus, you are one human. Your government will disavow your statements. Admiral Kane will continue preparing for conflict. And the Council will still vote to enforce containment. Unless enough of us decide to try something different, Marcus replied. Unless enough species on the Council and enough people in the Empire realize that the path we are on leads nowhere good. That is a lot of unless, Thexus observed. It is all I have. They stood together in the emptying chamber, 2 old friends watching their respective civilizations slide toward disaster, hoping against hope that words could somehow stop what seemed inevitable. Behind them, in the shadows of the upper gallery, a figure watched. Commander Lyssa Tarrant had been sent by Admiral Kane to observe the ambassador's statement. She had recorded everything. And what she had witnessed had shaken something fundamental in her understanding of the Empire's mission. Marcus Heron had just committed career suicide by suggesting the unthinkable, that maybe, just maybe, humanity was wrong. But he had also asked the Council to examine their own failures. To consider that their system might not be the only valid approach. Lyssa thought about the Admiral's certainty, his absolute conviction that the Empire's path was righteous. Then she thought about the ambassador's willingness to question, to admit error, to seek compromise. Which man represented humanity's true character? The decisive warrior or the uncertain diplomat? As she left the gallery to transmit her report, Lyssa realized with uncomfortable clarity that the answer to that question would determine not just humanity's future, but the galaxy's as well. Fractured loyalties. The encrypted transmission from Lyssa Tarrant arrived at Admiral Kane Vorstern's private terminal at 0300 ship time. He had been awake as usual, reviewing fleet dispositions and contingency plans. Sleep was a luxury for younger officers who had not yet learned that wars were won by those who outworked their enemies. He watched the recording of Marcus Heron's statement 3 times. By the 3rd viewing his coffee had gone cold. Computer, priority channel to Earth Central. Chancellor Rains, private encryption. The hologram materialized within seconds. Victoria Rains looked as tired as Kane felt, which meant she had also been watching the transmission. Well, she said without preamble, that was certainly not what we paid Marcus Heron to say. He has exceeded his authority, Kane replied flatly. His career is over. The question is how much damage he has done to our position. Rains leaned back in her chair. The political analysts are divided. Some think he has made us look weak and uncertain. Others believe he may have actually bought us valuable time by appealing to the Council's vanity. Time for what? For Operation Manifest to be fully prepared, Rains said. Kane, regardless of what Heron said or did not say, our position has not changed. We will not accept the Threshold Initiative. We will expand as planned. The only question is whether we do so gradually or decisively. Kane studied the Chancellor's face. Victoria Rains had been one of the architects of the Empire, a brilliant political strategist who had unified humanity under a single banner when the old Republic had fractured. He respected her enormously. But he also knew that respect did not require blind agreement. Chancellor, I must ask you something directly. Proceed. Do we truly believe that expansion is necessary for survival? Or have we convinced ourselves of that necessity to justify actions we want to take anyway? The silence that followed was profound. Rains's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Admiral, are you questioning our strategic direction? I am questioning whether we have properly evaluated alternatives, Kane replied carefully. Heron's statements, while unauthorized, raised points that deserve consideration. If we can achieve security and prosperity through cooperation rather than expansion, should we not explore that option? Cooperation has been explored for 40 years, Rains said. It has resulted in restrictions, suspicions, and now open containment. The Council will never accept us as equals, Kane. They will always see us as upstarts who need to be managed. Perhaps because we act like upstarts, Kane said quietly. Perhaps because we have allowed our wounded pride from the Mars incident to define our trajectory. Rains stood, her hologram moving to look out a window that showed Earth below. The Mars incident showed us the truth about the Council. When push came to shove, they demanded we sacrifice our own people to alien justice. They made it clear that human lives meant less than maintaining their political balance. Or they made it clear that justice applies to everyone equally, Kane suggested. Those officers fired on a civilian vessel, Chancellor. Hundreds died. If the Vorlon had fired on our civilians, we would demand justice too. Whose side are you on, Admiral? The question hung between them like a blade. Humanity's, Kane replied without hesitation. But I am beginning to wonder if we have correctly identified what serves humanity's interests. I have spent 38 years preparing for wars. I know how to fight. I know how to win. But Chancellor, I have also studied enough history to know that empires that believe themselves invincible usually discover their error at great cost. Rains turned back to face him. You think we are heading for disaster? I think we may be creating the very enemies we fear, Kane said. By acting as if the Council's concerns are invalid, by dismissing their fears as jealousy or incompetence, we confirm their worst assumptions about us. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if we show weakness? If we accept containment? I am not suggesting we accept containment, Kane clarified. I am suggesting we might distinguish between showing weakness and showing wisdom. Between accepting unjust restrictions and acknowledging that other species have legitimate interests we need to consider. Rains was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weariness that reminded Kane she was human, not just a political figure. Kane, do you know why I pushed for the Empire's formation? Why I worked so hard to replace the Republic? I assumed it was because the Republic failed to protect our people. That was part of it, Rains agreed. But the deeper reason was that I saw what the Council was doing to us. Not through malice but through their system. They were assimilating us slowly and subtly. Our children were learning to think like them, to value their priorities, to see human culture as something to be transcended rather than celebrated. She returned to her desk, her hologram sitting heavily. In another generation, humanity would have been just another Council species. Not evil or enslaved but fundamentally changed. Our drive, our ambition, our belief that we can make a difference, all of it would have been smoothed away by Council culture. We would have become comfortable, compliant, content to let others make the important decisions. Some would call that cultural evolution, Kane observed. Some would call it cultural extinction, Rains countered. Kane, I formed the Empire not to conquer the galaxy but to preserve humanity. To ensure that 10,000 years from now humans still exist as humans, not as some Council-approved version of ourselves. Kane absorbed this. And you believe that preservation requires expansion? I believe it requires strength, Rains said. Because the galaxy is not kind to the weak. The Council maintains peace through mutual deterrence and careful political balance. They are like a house of cards, Chancellor. Beautiful and complex, but fundamentally unstable. One strong wind and it all collapses. And you think we are that wind? I think we might be, Rains admitted. Or we might be the foundation for something better. A system based not on balance but on actual unity. Not Council-style unity where everyone maintains separate governments and competes quietly, but genuine unity where the best ideas win and everyone benefits. Under human leadership, Kane said. Under effective leadership, Rains corrected. If the Vorlon or Drachner could provide that, I would follow them. But they cannot because their systems are too bound by tradition and bureaucracy. Humanity is not inherently superior, Kane. We are just younger and therefore less burdened by the weight of failed attempts. Kane considered this. Chancellor, I need to ask you directly. If we proceed with Operation Manifest, if we reject the Threshold Initiative as planned, do you believe war is inevitable? Yes, Rains said simply. But I also believe that war is coming regardless of what we do. The question is whether we fight from a position of strength or weakness. Whether we choose our moment or let them choose it for us. And if there is a chance, however small, that Heron's approach could work? That genuine partnership is possible? Rains smiled sadly. Then I would be the happiest person alive, Kane. Because I do not want war. I do not want billions to die. I do not want to be remembered as the chancellor who burned the galaxy. She leaned forward. But I have seen no evidence that the Council is capable of treating us as equals. And I will not gamble humanity's survival on hope. The transmission ended shortly after, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts. He pulled up the recording of Heron's statement again, watching the ambassador struggle with his conscience, choosing honesty over obedience. It was admirable in a way. Also profoundly foolish. But was it wrong? Kane had built his career on certainty. On knowing the right course and executing it flawlessly. Doubt was the enemy of decisive action. Hesitation got people killed. Yet here he was, doubting. A chime announced another visitor. Lissa Tarrant entered, her expression troubled. Sir, we need to talk about Ambassador Heron's statement. I have already discussed it with the Chancellor, Kane replied. His career is over, but the political damage is contained. That is not what I meant, sir. Lissa stood at attention, her military bearing perfect, but her voice carried uncertainty. I meant we need to talk about whether he was right. Kane gestured for her to sit. Explain. Sir, I have served under you for 7 years. I believe in the Empire. I believe in our mission. But watching Heron today, watching him choose what he thought was right over what he was ordered to do, I found myself questioning things I thought were certain. Such as whether we are actually the heroes in this story, Lissa said quietly. Sir, I have reviewed the intelligence reports on our expansion. The incentives we offered that amounted to coercion. The economic pressures we applied to achieve political outcomes. The way we frame every action as defensive while consistently taking aggressive positions. She met his eyes. We look like an empire, sir. Not just in name but in behavior. And empires, as Earth's history shows, are rarely remembered fondly by the people they dominated. Kane was silent for a long moment. Commander, do you believe the Terran Empire is evil? No, sir, Lissa replied immediately. But I am beginning to wonder if we are so certain we are good that we have stopped questioning whether our actions actually align with our values. Our values include strength and self-determination. They also include justice and respect for others, Lissa countered. Sir, the Empire was founded on the principle that humanity would never again bow to alien authority. But somewhere along the way, that defensive principle became an offensive one. We went from refusing to be dominated to refusing to accept any constraints at all. Kane stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the construction yards. More ships taking shape. More weapons of war disguised as tools of peace. Commander, I am going to tell you something that stays in this room. Yes, sir. I no longer know if we are right, Kane admitted. I know we are strong. I know we are effective. I know we can win any conventional conflict with the Council. But I do not know if winning will actually give us what we claim to want. He turned back to face her. Chancellor Rains believes war is inevitable. She may be correct. But I have started to wonder if we are making it inevitable by treating it as such. If we prepare only for conflict, we make conflict the only possible outcome. What do you suggest, sir? I suggest, Kane said slowly, that we give Heron's approach a chance. Not because I believe it will work, but because we owe it to the billions who will die if it does not to actually try every alternative. Lissa's expression shifted from trouble to something approaching hope. Sir, that could be seen as insubordination. Only if I order Operation Manifest to proceed on schedule, Kane replied. If instead I recommend a tactical delay pending further diplomatic developments, that would be within my authority as fleet commander. The Chancellor will not be pleased. The Chancellor wants to preserve humanity, Kane said. So do I. We simply may disagree on the best method. He returned to his desk, pulling up fleet orders. Commander, I want you to prepare a confidential assessment of our actual readiness for sustained conflict with the Council. Not the official reports that assume optimal conditions. A realistic evaluation of what a war would actually cost us. Yes, sir. And Commander? Make sure that assessment includes not just military casualties, but economic disruption, civil unrest and long-term strategic vulnerabilities. I want to know what we are really committing to if we go down this path. After Lissa left, Kane sat alone in his office, wondering if he had just made the best decision of his career or the worst. He thought about Earth's history. About the empires that had been certain of their righteousness. About the generals who had started wars believing they would be quick and decisive, only to watch them drag on for decades. He thought about the young ensign he had been 40 years ago, fresh from academy, certain that he knew how the universe worked. Experience had taught him that certainty was often just ignorance wearing confidence. Perhaps it was time to admit that he did not have all the answers. That humanity, for all its strengths, might actually benefit from listening to species who had been navigating the galaxy for thousands of years before humans invented the wheel. Or perhaps the Council was paralyzed by their own complexity, and humanity's aggressive approach was the only thing that would force necessary change. Kane did not know. And for the first time in his military career, he was willing to admit that not knowing might be wisdom rather than weakness. Outside, among the stars, the galaxy waited for humanity's next move. Inside the Vanguard, its admiral had just decided that next move should not be war. Not yet. Not if there was any other way. The test of fire. The test case that Ambassador Heron proposed came from an unexpected source. The Kalurian Protectorate, a minor council member whose home system was dying. Their primary star had entered an unstable phase, outputting radiation bursts that were slowly sterilizing their worlds. The Kalurians had petitioned the Council for help relocating their population of 6 billion souls. The Council had formed committees. Those committees had created subcommittees. 3 years had passed, and the Kalurians were still waiting for action while their people slowly died. Heron suggested that the Terran Empire and the Galactic Council jointly manage the relocation as a demonstration of what cooperation could achieve. The Council would provide the transportation network, using their vast fleet of civilian vessels. The Empire would provide the terraforming technology and industrial capacity to prepare new worlds for habitation. The proposal was debated for 2 weeks. Chancellor Mervok argued it was too risky. Ambassador Reichel claimed it was a trap, a way for the Empire to gain influence over a council species. Representative Kessa of the Lumini Unity saw it as an opportunity to prove that cooperation was still possible. In the end, the vote passed by a narrow margin. 25 species in favor, 17 opposed, 5 abstaining. On Earth, Chancellor Rains opposed committing resources to the project. It would delay Operation Manifest. It would expose human technology to Council scrutiny. It would set a precedent that the Empire could be manipulated through moral appeals. Admiral Kane argued in favor, presenting his classified assessment of what war would actually cost. The numbers were staggering. Even in victory, the Empire would suffer millions of casualties and decades of economic disruption. And victory was far from certain if the Council truly unified against them. The debate within Earth Central lasted 3 days. In the end, Rains agreed to participate, but with conditions. The Empire would maintain full control over its technology. Any Kalurian settlement on Empire-prepared worlds would be voluntary, not mandatory. And the project would have a strict timeline, 2 years to complete or the Empire would withdraw. The Kalurian Exodus, as it became known, began 6 months later. Commander Lissa Tarrant found herself assigned to the project as the Empire's military liaison, working alongside a Vorlon coordinator named Rethix who was Thexus's cousin. The relationship between them was professionally frigid at first. "Your Empire's terraforming equipment is impressive," Rethix admitted during their first planning session aboard the coordination station Providence. "But your insistence on maintaining exclusive control suggests you still do not trust us." "Given that half the Council expects us to use this project as a cover for military expansion," Lissa replied, "I think our caution is understandable." "And our caution about your militarism is equally understandable," Rethix countered. His crystalline structure caught the station's light, creating refracted patterns across the walls. "Yet here we are, attempting to trust each other." "Under orders," Lissa added. "Still, trust is trust even when mandated," Rethix said. "The question is whether we choose to honor that mandate or undermine it." Over the following months, Lissa found herself grudgingly respecting Rethix's competence. The Vorlon's organizational skills were extraordinary. He coordinated transport schedules for billions of refugees across dozens of worlds with a precision that rivaled the Empire's best logistics officers. The first convoy of Kalurian refugees arrived at New Sanctuary, a barren world in neutral space that human engineers had spent 6 months transforming. Atmospheric processors had created breathable air. Orbital mirrors regulated temperature. Automated factories had constructed basic infrastructure. Lissa watched from Providence as the first shuttles touched down, disgorging families who had been living in overcrowded evacuation centers for years. The Kalurians' bioluminescent skin patterns showed joy, gratitude, and hope. "Your Empire does good work when it chooses to," Rethix observed beside her. "We always try to do good work," Lissa replied. "We just disagree about what that means." "No," Rethix corrected gently. "You do excellent technical work. But you forget that civilizations are not built on technical excellence alone. They are built on trust, compromise, and the willingness to accept that you cannot control everything. Lissa watched another shuttle land. The Council's approach has left the Kalurians suffering for 3 years while committees debated. Our approach would have had them relocated in 6 months. Perhaps, Rethix acknowledged. But your approach would also have made them dependent on you. Our approach preserves their autonomy even if it is slower. Your approach might have let them all die before you finished debating. True, Rethix admitted. Which is why this joint project is so valuable. Your speed combined with our consideration. Your capability combined with our restraint. It was a simple observation, but it stayed with Lissa. Maybe neither approach was inherently better. Maybe they needed each other. The thought was uncomfortable. 3 months into the exodus, disaster struck. A radiation burst from the Kalurian star came earlier than predicted, far stronger than the models suggested. 13 billion Kalurians remained on the homeworld, and the burst had knocked out half their shield generators. Emergency evacuation protocols activated immediately. But the numbers were impossible. Even with the full transport fleet working at maximum capacity, they could not extract 13 billion people before the next burst, which stellar physicists predicted would occur in 48 hours. The coordination station erupted into chaos. Council representatives argued about liability and proper procedure. Some suggested it was too dangerous to risk more ships. Others demanded action but disagreed on what that action should be. Lissa watched the debate deteriorate and felt sick. While they argued, billions were dying. She opened a secure channel to the Vanguard. Commander Tarrant to Admiral Kane, Priority Alpha. Kane's face appeared. He looked older than she remembered. Report, Commander. Sir, the Kalurian crisis has escalated. The Council is paralyzed by debate. Billions will die without immediate intervention. She took a breath. Sir, I am requesting permission to commit Empire resources without Council approval. Explain your proposal. The Vanguard and its support fleet are equipped with mass evacuators designed for military purposes but capable of emergency civilian transport. If we deploy them now, we could extract an additional 6 billion Kalurians before the next burst. She paused. But sir, this would mean Empire warships entering Kalurian space without Council authorization. It could be seen as exactly the kind of aggressive action they fear. Kane was silent for a long moment. Commander, what does your liaison say about this? Lissa glanced at Rethix, who had been listening to her side of the conversation. Permission to bring him into this channel, sir? Granted. Rethix's crystalline form appeared in the hologram beside Lissa. Admiral Kane. I am Coordinator Rethix of the Vorlon Collective. Coordinator. Your people are debating while the Kalurians die. Do you have a solution? No, Rethix admitted. But I understand why Commander Tarrant contacted you. Your empire has the capability to save lives that will otherwise be lost. The question is whether we can trust you to use that capability without exploiting it. Can you? Kane asked directly. Rethix's colors shifted through patterns Lissa had learned indicated deep consideration. My cousin Thexus believes humanity has lost its way. That your empire cares only about power and expansion. I thought she was correct. And now? Now I have watched Commander Tarrant work alongside me for 3 months. She could have undermined this project at any point. She could have used it to advance the Empire's interests at the Council's expense. Instead, she has been professional, cooperative, and genuinely committed to helping the Kalurians. Rethix moved closer to the hologram pickup. Admiral, if you deploy your fleet to save the Kalurians without demanding anything in return, if you truly act for humanitarian reasons rather than strategic advantage, it would prove that the Empire is more than we feared. And if we fail? If something goes wrong and Council ships are caught in the evacuation? Kane asked. Then my people will probably declare war on yours, Rethix said honestly. But that war seems inevitable anyway. At least this way, if war comes, it will come because of misfortune rather than malice. Kane looked between them. Commander Tarrant, do you trust this Vorlon coordinator? Yes, sir, Lissa replied without hesitation. I do. Then we deploy, Kane decided. Full fleet commitment. Priority Alpha evacuation protocols. And Commander? Sir? Make sure the Council knows this was your idea. If this succeeds, you should get the credit. If it fails, I will take the blame. He smiled slightly. That is what admirals are for. The channel closed. Lissa looked at Rethix. I hope we both did not just make a terrible mistake. We did not, Rethix said firmly. For the first time since I have been part of this coordination effort, I believe we might actually succeed. Not just in saving the Kalurians, but in proving that our species can work together when it truly matters. The Vanguard arrived in Kalurian space 18 hours later, leading a fleet of 47 Imperial vessels. The sight of human dreadnoughts entering the system without authorization caused panic in some council quarters. Emergency sessions were called. Accusations of invasion flew. But the ships ignored the political chaos and went straight to work. The mass evacuators had been designed to deploy entire military divisions onto hostile worlds. Repurposed, they could extract tens of thousands of civilians per cycle. The Vanguard alone began pulling evacuees from the surface at a rate that stunned the council observers. Lissa coordinated with Rethix from Providence, managing the integration of Imperial and Council transport networks. What should have been a logistical nightmare became something almost elegant as the two systems meshed. Your fleet is exceeding projected evacuation rates by 40%, Rethix reported, his colors showing astonishment. How? Imperial efficiency, Lissa replied, then caught herself. Also, our crews are working triple shifts voluntarily. No one wants to see the Kalurians die. 36 hours into the evacuation, the stellar monitors showed the next radiation burst building. It would hit in less than 12 hours. 7 billion Kalurians had been evacuated, but 6 billion remained. We are not going to make it, Rethix said quietly, watching the projections. Lissa refused to accept that. What if we evacuate to the outer system instead of to other worlds? Just get them off the surface and behind shelter? The outer system has no habitable worlds. No infrastructure. Where would they go? The fleet, Lissa said. We pack them into every ship we have. Military, civilian, whatever. Get them off the surface and into orbit. Then we jump the entire fleet out of the system before the burst hits. That is insane, Rethix said. The ships would be overcrowded to lethal levels. Life support would fail. And jumping with that many civilian vessels in formation, the navigation alone would be difficult but possible, Lissa finished. Coordinator, it is this or watch 6 billion people die. What is your choice? Rethix was silent for 3 seconds. Then his colors shifted to determined gold. I will coordinate the council fleet. You handle the Imperial vessels. And may whatever deities exist forgive us if this goes wrong. The next 8 hours were controlled chaos. Every ship in the system, from military dreadnoughts to civilian transports to mining vessels, descended to Kalurian surface. Evacuees were packed into cargo holds, crew quarters, even spaces never designed for life support. Engineers worked frantically to boost oxygen recyclers and expand capacity. The Vanguard alone carried 300,000 Kalurians, packed so tightly that many had to stand. In the cargo bays, in the corridors, in spaces where humans should have been storing ammunition and supplies, frightened families huddled together. Admiral Kane walked through the packed corridors, his presence a calming force. He stopped to speak with families, using a translation device to offer reassurance in their own language. Lissa watched via security feeds, seeing a side of the Admiral she had never witnessed before. The stellar burst began building 6 hours ahead of schedule. All ships, this is Providence Control, Rethix's voice came across all channels. Prepare for emergency jump on my mark. Navigation coordinates are being uploaded now. Stay in formation. Do not deviate. If you lose cohesion, do not attempt to rejoin. Jump to safety independently. Lissa watched the countdown. 4 minutes until the burst reached lethal levels. 367 ships from 40 different species, carrying the entire surviving Kalurian population. This is Commander Tarrant to all Imperial vessels, she broadcast. Remember your training. Trust your crews. Trust the coordinators. And trust that what we do today matters. The radiation levels spiked. Jump. Rethix commanded. 367 ships activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously, a coordination feat that should have been impossible. The formation held for the first few seconds, then began to drift as different drive types operated at slightly different rates. But they had cleared the system. Every single ship. The radiation burst hit the Kalurian homeworld with apocalyptic force, sterilizing everything that remained. But everything that remained was infrastructure and buildings. Every life had been saved. The fleet regrouped at New Sanctuary over the next 6 hours. Ships limped in with overloaded systems and exhausted crews. But they all arrived. 367 vessels, carrying 13 billion Kalurians. 0 casualties. Lissa found Rethix in the Providence Operations Center. The Vorlon coordinator was so exhausted his crystalline structure had dimmed to almost transparency. We did it, she said simply. You did it, Rethix corrected. That insane plan should not have worked. But your crews executed it flawlessly, and our transport captains followed Imperial military protocols without question. His colors shifted to something Lyssa had never seen before. Commander, I have been part of Council operations for 30 years. I have never seen anything like what your people accomplished today. Our people, Lyssa corrected. Council and Empire together. Yes, Rethix agreed. Together. The rescue became a sensation across the galaxy. News feeds showed Imperial warships packed with Kalurian refugees, Council vessels working in perfect coordination with human dreadnoughts, and the impossible evacuation that saved an entire species. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Species that had been preparing for war with the Empire suddenly questioned whether humanity was truly the threat they had believed. The images of human soldiers helping Kalurian children, of Admiral Kane walking among refugees offering comfort, of Commander Tarrant working seamlessly with Vorlon coordinators painted a different picture than the aggressive Empire narrative. But not everyone was pleased. On Earth, Chancellor Rains watched the news coverage with mixed feelings. The Empire had proven itself capable of heroism, yes. But it had also shown vulnerability, compassion, and willingness to work under someone else's coordination. This will complicate things, she told her advisors. Complicate or improve? One asked. Rains did not answer. In the council chambers, Ambassador Thexus watched the same coverage. She saw her cousin Rethix praising human efficiency and cooperation. She saw council species celebrating alongside human crews. And she wondered if perhaps Marcus Heron had been right. If perhaps there was still hope for genuine partnership. But deep in military planning centers on 12 different council worlds, strategists looked at the same footage and drew different conclusions. They saw the Vanguard's capabilities. They saw how quickly the Imperial fleet had mobilized. They saw how effectively human forces operated. And they feared it even more. Because the Kalurian rescue had proven something terrifying. When the Terran Empire decided to act, they were devastatingly effective. In the right hands, that effectiveness saved billions. In the wrong hands, it could conquer the galaxy. The question that kept species awake at night was simple. Which hands were these? The choice that defines us. 3 months after the Kalurian rescue, the Galactic Council convened for what many believed would be the final session before war became inevitable. The atmosphere in the Grand Assembly Hall was different from previous meetings. There was tension, yes, but also something unexpected: uncertainty. The neat categories of Council species and Imperial threat had blurred. The joint rescue had forced everyone to reconsider assumptions they had treated as facts. Ambassador Marcus Heron stood at the central podium once more. He had expected to be recalled to Earth in disgrace after his unauthorized diplomatic initiative. Instead, Chancellor Rains had sent him a brief message: finish what you started. He still did not know if that was an order or a challenge. Members of the Council, Marcus began, 3 months ago, this body approved a test case for Imperial Council cooperation. I stand before you now to report on the results of that test. Holographic displays activated, showing statistics from the Kalurian rescue. Evacuation rates. Survival numbers. Coordination metrics. The data painted a picture of almost perfect cooperation between forces that had been on the brink of war. 13 billion souls saved, Marcus continued. 0 casualties. 367 ships from 40 species working as a unified fleet. It should have been impossible. Our systems are different. Our protocols incompatible. Our languages and cultures barely align. He paused, looking around the chamber. And yet it worked. Not despite our differences, but in some ways because of them. Imperial efficiency combined with Council experience. Human decisiveness paired with Vorlon organizational genius. Drakner military discipline coordinating with Lumini adaptability. Chancellor Mervok leaned forward. Ambassador, these are impressive statistics. But they describe a rescue operation, not a political framework. How does saving the Kalurians address the fundamental tensions between the Empire and the Council? Because it proves that those tensions are not fundamental, Marcus replied. They are chosen. We have convinced ourselves that conflict is inevitable because our systems are incompatible. The Kalurian rescue demonstrates that incompatibility is not destiny. Ambassador Reichel of the Drakner sovereignty rose. Pretty words, Ambassador. But one successful cooperation does not erase decades of imperial expansion. It does not change the fact that your empire grows stronger every day while refusing to accept any limitations on that growth. You are correct, Marcus acknowledged. And that brings me to why I truly requested this assembly. He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would either save the peace or guarantee war. The Terran Empire is prepared to accept modified restrictions on military expansion in exchange for full council recognition of our sovereignty and equal partnership in galactic governance. The chamber erupted. This was so far beyond Marcus's authority that it bordered on treason. He was proposing to restructure the relationship between humanity and the galaxy without Earth Central's explicit approval. Chancellor Rains, watching via secure transmission from Earth, closed her eyes. The ambassador had either doomed them all or saved them. She would know which within the hour. Marcus waited for the noise to subside before continuing. The modified terms are these. The Terran Empire will limit new military construction to defensive systems and exploration vessels. We will not establish military bases and systems claimed by Council species. We will submit to third-party verification of treaty compliance. In exchange, he continued over the renewed murmurs, the Council will recognize the Empire's current territorial claims as legitimate. You will grant us full voting rights in this assembly, not junior member status. And you will acknowledge that our governmental system, however different from yours, is valid for humanity. Additionally, Marcus said, his voice strengthening, we propose the creation of a joint task force, modeled on the Kalurian rescue, to address galactic crises that neither the Council nor the Empire can resolve alone. This force would operate under shared command, with both Imperial and Council authority required for deployment. Thexis rose from the Vorlon section. Ambassador Heron, these terms would require the Council to accept the Empire as an equal partner rather than a problematic member species. That represents a fundamental restructuring of this body's hierarchy. Yes, Marcus agreed. It does. Because the current structure has failed. It failed the Kalurians, who waited 3 years for help that should have come in 3 months. It fails every time bureaucracy delays action until crisis becomes catastrophe. And it will fail catastrophically if the Council and Empire go to war. He pulled up projections, casualty estimates for a full-scale conflict. The numbers were staggering. Trillions dead across decades of warfare. Whole sectors devastated. Technologies destroyed. Civilizations collapsed. This is what we risk if we cannot find compromise, Marcus said quietly. My species is young. We make mistakes. We move too fast and break things. But we also learn quickly. The Kalurian rescue taught us that we need the Council's experience and wisdom. I hope it taught you that you need our capability and decisiveness. What you call decisiveness we call recklessness, someone called from the upper galleries. Then call it recklessness, Marcus replied. But recognize that sometimes recklessness saves lives that caution would let die. The galaxy needs both. It needs species that move carefully and species that act boldly. It needs your ancient wisdom and our youthful energy. He deactivated the projections. I cannot force this body to accept my proposal. I can only ask you to consider it seriously. To ask yourselves whether the cost of rejecting it is truly worth whatever satisfaction you might gain from containing the Empire. Marcus stepped back from the podium. I have said all I came to say. The decision is now yours. The debate that followed lasted 16 hours, through the night cycle and into the next day. Factions formed and reformed. Species that had been enemies found common ground. Allies discovered unexpected disagreements. Throughout it all, 3 questions dominated. Could the Terran Empire be trusted to honor restrictions after decades of expansion? Could the Council accept a human majority population species as an equal partner without losing its own identity? And most importantly, was war truly inevitable, or were they creating that inevitability by treating it as foregone? In a private channel, Thexis contacted Rethix. Cousin, you worked with their military for 3 months. Can they be trusted? Can we? Rethix replied. Thexis, I watched Council vessels defer to Imperial coordination because their system worked better than ours. I saw human crews follow Vorlon protocols because our experience prevented mistakes. Neither side was perfect. Both sides were necessary. That does not answer my question. Yes, it does, Rethix said. You are asking if humans can be trusted. I am telling you that trust is not a trait species possess. It is a choice individuals make. Commander Tarrant chose to trust me with Imperial lives. Admiral Kane chose to trust that the Council would not exploit his fleet's vulnerability. They made themselves vulnerable because the alternative was letting billions die. He paused. So the question is not whether they can be trusted. The question is whether we are brave enough to make ourselves vulnerable in return. The vote was called at the 30-hour mark. Every species was given time to speak before casting their ballot. The Drachner sovereignty voted against, calling the Empire too dangerous to empower. The Lumini Unity voted in favor, citing the rescue as proof of humanity's better nature. The Vorlon Collective abstained, with Thexus explaining that her people needed time to consider such a fundamental change. When the count finished, the proposal had passed by a single vote, 24 in favor, 23 opposed, with the Vorlon abstention being the deciding factor. The galaxy held its breath. On Earth, Chancellor Rains faced her own decision. Marcus Heron had committed the Empire to terms she had not approved. Admiral Kane had supported the initiative against her expressed wishes. They had effectively staged a diplomatic coup, forcing her hand by making the Empire look reasonable to the Council. She could reject the terms. Recall Heron. Relieve Kane. Proceed with Operation Manifest and show the galaxy that the Empire would not be manipulated. Or she could accept that her subordinates had perhaps found a better path than the one she had charted. Victoria Rains had not become Chancellor by being indecisive. She pulled up a direct channel to Marcus Heron. Ambassador, you exceeded your authority so dramatically that I should have you arrested for treason. Yes, Chancellor, Marcus replied steadily. You committed the Empire to restrictions on our military development without consultation or approval. Yes, Chancellor. You restructured our relationship with the galactic community based on your own judgment of what serves humanity's interests. Yes, Chancellor. Rains was silent for a moment. I want you to understand something, Marcus. The empire I built was designed to ensure humanity would never again be at the mercy of alien powers. Every policy, every expansion, every show of strength was about guaranteeing our survival and freedom. I understand, Chancellor. But watching the Kalurian rescue, watching our people work alongside Council species as genuine partners rather than suspicious allies, I found myself wondering if I had confused survival with dominance. If I had let the Mars incident define our trajectory when it should have been just one event in a longer story. She leaned forward. You have given me an opportunity to change that story. To show the galaxy that the Empire can be strong without being threatening. That humanity can be confident without being arrogant. That we can preserve our essential nature while still being part of something larger than ourselves. So I am not committing treason? Marcus asked. Oh, you absolutely are, Rains replied with a slight smile. But I am going to pardon you for it. And then I am going to ratify the agreement you negotiated. And then we are going to find out together whether the risk you took was worth it. The transmission ended. Marcus stood alone in his quarters, feeling the weight of what he had done. He had bet everything. His career, the Empire's position, possibly even galactic peace, on the hope that cooperation was possible. That different species with different values could find common ground. He still did not know if he was right. But he knew that not trying would have guaranteed failure. Admiral Kane received his own communication from the Chancellor. He expected relief of command at minimum, possibly court-martial. Instead, Rains appointed him to command the joint task force that Marcus had proposed. You will work alongside a council admiral of their choosing, she told him. You will operate under shared authority. You will compromise and cooperate and probably find it deeply frustrating. And if I refuse? Kane asked. Then I will find someone else, Rains replied. But Kane, you started this. You delayed Operation Manifest. You supported Heron's initiative. You sent your fleet into danger to save an alien species. You do not get to walk away now. I will do it, Kane said. But Chancellor, I need to know. Do you truly believe this will work? That the Empire and Council can coexist as partners? I believe that you and Commander Tarrant and Coordinator Rethix made it work for the Kalurians, Rains replied. That is a start. Whether we can scale that success to the entire galaxy. She shrugged. We are about to find out. On Sanctuary Station, representatives from both sides began the long process of implementing the new framework. Joint committees were formed. Command structures negotiated. Verification protocols established. It was messy and frustrating. Council species struggled with Imperial efficiency, finding it aggressive even when it was just thoroughness. Imperial personnel chafed under Council procedures, seeing unnecessary bureaucracy in what was actually accumulated wisdom. But they worked through it. Because the alternative had been clearly defined in casualty projections and burning worlds. Commander Lissa Tarrant was assigned as Kane's executive officer for the Joint Task Force. She found herself working daily with Rethix, who had been appointed as the Council's senior coordinator. Your empire still frightens many species, Rethix told her during one planning session. This agreement does not change decades of aggressive expansion. And your council still frustrates us, Lissa replied. One successful cooperation does not fix your systemic inefficiencies. Then we are trapped in eternal conflict? Rethix asked. Or we are choosing to work through our frustrations rather than kill each other over them, Lissa suggested. That seems like progress. Minimal progress, Rethix agreed. But yes, progress nonetheless. 6 months after the agreement was ratified, the Joint Task Force responded to its first crisis. A mining accident on a remote world had trapped 15,000 workers from 7 species underground. The disaster was too large for local authorities but not significant enough to justify full military intervention by either the Council or Empire. The Joint Task Force deployed within hours. Imperial heavy equipment worked alongside Council rescue teams. What should have taken weeks took 3 days. All 15,000 workers were rescued alive. It was not as dramatic as saving 13 billion Kalurians. But it demonstrated that the cooperation was sustainable, not just possible in extraordinary circumstances. Over the following years, the Joint Task Force responded to 37 crises. Some were natural disasters. Some were industrial accidents. A few were armed conflicts between minor species that needed neutral mediation backed by overwhelming force. The force was not perfect. There were disagreements, arguments, and occasional spectacular failures of communication. But it worked more often than it failed. And each success built trust that made the next cooperation slightly easier. The Terran Empire continued to grow, but at a pace that no longer terrified the Council. New colonies were established through negotiation rather than assertion. Trade agreements replaced territorial demands. The Empire's military strength became an asset for galactic security rather than a threat to it. The Council adapted too. Procedures were streamlined. Decision-making became faster. The presence of human members in full standing forced other species to question assumptions about how things had to work. Neither side became like the other. The Empire remained decisive, centralized, and efficiency-focused. The Council remained deliberative, distributed, and tradition-bound. But they learned to appreciate rather than fear their differences. 10 years after the Kalurian rescue, Marcus Heron stood in the Grand Assembly Hall once more. He was older now, his hair fully gray, his face lined with the weight of difficult decisions. He was being honored with the Galactic Service Medal, the Council's highest civilian award. Ambassador Heron, Chancellor Mravok said during the ceremony, you committed treason against your own government. You exceeded your authority in ways that should have ended your career. You bet the fate of billions on your judgment alone. Marcus nodded, accepting the criticism. And in doing so, Mravok continued, you saved us from ourselves. You forced both the Empire and the Council to question whether conflict was truly inevitable. You gave us permission to choose a different path. The medal was placed around his neck. The assembly rose in a standing ovation that transcended species boundaries. Later, at the reception, Thexis approached him. Her crystalline form had dulled slightly with age, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. Marcus, my old friend, I must tell you something I have never admitted before. What is that? Marcus asked. 10 years ago, I voted in favor of your proposal, Thexis said quietly. I changed my vote at the last moment from abstention to approval. That is why it passed by a single vote. Marcus stared at her. But you announced an abstention. I did, Thexis agreed. Because I wanted both sides to believe the decision was uncertain. To believe that we stood on a knife's edge. I thought it would make everyone more careful, more committed to making the agreement work. She moved closer. I lied in my official statement, Marcus. And I am not sorry I did. Because that lie made both sides work harder to prove cooperation was possible. They believed they were just barely avoiding disaster, so they made sure to avoid it. Marcus laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Thexis, that is the most human thing I have ever heard you say. Perhaps we have learned from each other after all, Thexis replied. Your species has learned patience. Mine has learned decisiveness. Both of us have learned that the galaxy is better when we work together. She paused. Though I fear what might have happened if someone less wise than you had been representing the Empire. Or if someone less committed to peace had commanded your fleets. We were fortunate, Marcus agreed. The right people were in the right positions at the right moment. No, Thexis corrected. The right people made the right choices. That is not fortune, Marcus. That is character. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, species that had nearly gone to war were now trading, cooperating, and in some cases genuinely befriending each other. The human population had expanded to represent nearly 30% of the galactic community, the largest single species block. But that demographic weight had not translated into dominance because the framework Marcus had negotiated ensured no single species could control the whole. Admiral Kane, now retired, watched the ceremony via public broadcast from his home on New Harmony. Beside him sat a Lumini family who had invited him to their child's naming ceremony. He had become an unexpected symbol of cooperation, the military commander who chose partnership over conquest. "Do you regret not pushing for victory?" the Lumini father asked him. "Your empire could have won the war. You could have controlled the galaxy." Cain thought about the question seriously. "Control is not the same as leadership," he replied. "We would have controlled a wasteland populated by species that hated us. Instead, we lead by example in a galaxy where our partners choose to follow because they see value in our contribution." He smiled. "I think we got the better bargain." Commander Lissa Tarrant had risen to admiral herself, now commanding a joint fleet that included vessels from a dozen species. When younger officers asked her about the early days, about how the cooperation had begun, she always told them about the Kalurian rescue. "We did not trust each other," she would say. "We had every reason to believe the worst of each other. But we chose to trust anyway. We made ourselves vulnerable because the alternative was letting people die." She would pause. "That is the lesson. Not that trust is easy or that cooperation is natural, but that both are possible when we decide they matter more than our fears." And on Earth, Victoria Reigns prepared to step down as Chancellor after 20 years in power. Her final address to humanity was broadcast across every imperial world. "I built this empire to protect us," she said. "To ensure that humanity would never again be at the mercy of powers we did not control. And in building it, I nearly destroyed what I was trying to protect." She looked directly into the camera. "Our strength lies not in standing apart from the galaxy, but in standing within it as ourselves. Not bowing to alien authority but working alongside alien partners. Not conquering but contributing. The empire I built was necessary for its time," Reigns continued. "But the empire we need for the future is one that my generation was too afraid to imagine. An empire that does not just preserve humanity, but helps elevate all species." She concluded, "We were right to fear what we might become. But we were wrong to think that avoiding our fears meant refusing to grow. The Terran Empire will endure not because we are the strongest, but because we finally learned to be strong for others, not just for ourselves." Years later, historians would debate whether the Kalurian rescue had truly changed the trajectory of galactic history or if it was simply the most visible moment in a longer evolution. But those who were there, who stood on the knife's edge between cooperation and catastrophe, knew the truth. In that moment, when a handful of individuals chose trust over suspicion, when they bet on cooperation despite every logical reason to prepare for war, they had changed everything. Not because humans were special. Not because the Council was wise. But because when faced with the choice between the species they feared they were becoming and the species they hoped they could be, they chose hope. And in the vast darkness of space, among countless stars and infinite possibilities, that choice made all the difference. The Galactic Council had feared what the Empire had become. But what the Empire had become was simply what humanity had always been: flawed, ambitious, sometimes reckless, occasionally